Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna, we're studying Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, entitled Answers by Citing the Lord's Version. We're on text 37. Today's July 17th, 2021. I'm here with Bhakta Jeremy and Bhakti Brielle here online. I see Bhakta Len and Gajendra Prabhu and Bhakti Kim, the Mara family, George, Danielle, Saraswati, Kristen, and Mother Lakshmi Priya, and Mother Malini, and maybe there's others there at the Bhakti Yoga Retreat. Hare Krishna. Okay, so text 37. Etat matam samatishta paramena samadhina bhavan kalpa vikalpeshu na vimuyati karhichit etanmatam samatishta paramena samadhina bhavan kalpa vikalpeshu na vimuyati karhichit etanmatam samatishta paramena samadhina bhavan kalpa vikalpeshu na vimuyati karhichit etanmatam samatishta paramena samadhina bhavan kalpa vikalpeshu na vimuyati karhichit etanmatam samatishta paramena samadhina bhavan kalpa vikalpeshu na vimuyati karhichit. Etanmatam samatishta paramena samadhina bhavan kalpa vikalpeshu na vimuyati karhichit.
Etanmatam samatishta paramena samadhina kalpa vikalpeshu
bhavan kalpa vikalpeshu
na vimuyati karhichit.
na vimuyati karhichit.
Etanmatam samatishta paramena samadhina bhavan kalpa vikalpeshu na vimuyati karhichit.
Would anyone else like to recite the verse?
Etan matam samatista,
Itan matam samatishta,
paramena samadhina,
paramena samadhina,
bhavan kalpa vikalpeshu,
bhavan kalpa vikalpeshu,
na vimuyadi karhichit.
na vimuyati karhichit. Okay, we'll go to the word for word. This is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 37. Etat,
Etat.
this,
This.
matam,
Matam.
the conclusion,
The conclusion.
samatishta,
Samatishta.
remain fixed,
Remain fixed.
paramena,
Paramena.
by the Supreme,
By the Supreme.
samadhina,
Samadhina.
concentration of the mind,
Concentration of the mind.
bhavan,
Bhavan.
yourself,
Yourself.
kalpa,
Kalpa.
intermediate devastation,
Intermediate devastation.
vikalpeshu,
Vikalpeshu.
in the final devastation,
The final devastation.
navimuyati,
Navimuyati.
will never
Will
bewilder,
never bewilder.
karhichit,
Karichit.
anything like complacence.
Anything like complacence.
Translation, O Brahma, just follow this conclusion by fixed concentration of mind, and no pride will disturb you, neither in the partial nor in the final devastation. So this is the 7th of 7 verses spoken by Krishna or Vishnu to Brahma. And the 3rd to 6th were what's called the seed verses, and this is like a follow-up to the seed verses spoken by Krishna to Brahma. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. As in the Bhagavad Gita 10th chapter, the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, has summarized the whole text in 4 verses, namely Aham Sarvasya Prabhava, etc. So the complete Srimad Bhagavatam has also been summarized in 4 verses as Aham Eva Sameva Agre, etc. Thus, the secret purpose of the most important Bhagavatite conclusion has been explained by the original speaker of the Srimad Bhagavatam, who is also the original speaker of the Bhagavad Gita, the personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. There are many grammarians and non-devotee material wranglers who have tried to present false interpretations of these 4 verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam, but the Lord himself advised Brahmaji not to be deviated from the fixed conclusion the Lord had taught him. The Lord was the teacher of the nucleus of Srimad Bhagavatam in 4 verses, and Brahma was the receiver of the knowledge. Misinterpretation of the word aham by the word jugglery of the impersonalist should not disturb the mind of the strict followers of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is the text of the personality of Godhead and his unalloyed devotees, who are also known as the Bhagavatas, and any outsider should have no access to this confidential literature of devotional service. But unfortunately, the impersonalist, who has no relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, sometimes tries to interpret Srimad Bhagavatam by his poor fund of knowledge in grammar and dry speculation. Therefore, the Lord warns Brahma, and through Brahma, all future devotees of the Lord in the disciplic succession of Brahma, that one should never be misled by the conclusion of the so-called grammarians or by other men with a poor fund of knowledge, but must always fix the mind properly via the parampara system. No one should try to give a new interpretation by dint of mundane knowledge. And the first step, therefore, in pursuance of the system of knowledge received by Brahma, is to approach a bona fide guru, who is the representative of the Lord following the parampara system. No one should try to squeeze out his own meaning by imperfect mundane knowledge. The guru, or the bona fide spiritual master, is competent to teach the disciple in the right path with reference to the context of all authentic Vedic literature. He does not attempt to juggle words to bewilder the student. The bona fide spiritual master, by his activities, teaches the disciple the principles of devotional service. Without personal service, one would go on speculating like the impersonalists and dry speculators, life after life, and would be unable to reach the final conclusion. By following the instructions of the bona fide spiritual master in conjunction with the principles of revealed scriptures, the student will rise to the plane of complete knowledge, which will be exhibited by development of detachment from the world of sense gratification. The mundane wranglers are surprised that one can detach himself from the world of sense gratification, and thus any attempt to be fixed in God realization appears to them to be mysticism. This detachment from the sensory world is called the Brahma Bhuta stage of realization, and the preliminary, which is the preliminary stage of transcendental devotional life, Parabhakti. The Brahma Bhuta stage of life is also known as the Atmarama stage, in which one is fully self-satisfied and does not hanker for the world of sense enjoyment. This stage of full satisfaction is the proper situation for understanding the transcendental knowledge of the personality of Godhead. The Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.20 affirms this. Evam prasana manaso bhagavad bhakti yogata bhagavad tattva jnanam mukta sangasya jayate. Thus, in the completely satisfied stage of life, exhibited by full detachment from the world of sense enjoyment as a result of performing devotional service, one can understand the science of God in the liberated stage. In this stage of full satisfaction and detachment from the sensory world, one can know the mystery of the science of God with all its confidential intricacies, and not by grammar or academic speculation. Because Brahma qualified himself for such reception, the Lord was pleased to disclose the purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam. This direct instruction by the Lord to any devotee who is detached from the world of sense gratification is possible, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, text 10. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamamu priyanti te. Unto the devotees who are constantly engaged in the Lord's transcendental loving service, priti purvakam, the Lord, out of his causeless mercy upon the devotee, gives direct instruction so that the devotee may make accurate progress on the path, returning home back to Godhead. One should not therefore try to understand these 4 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam by mental speculation, rather by direct perception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One is able to know all about his abode, Vaikuntha, as was seen and experienced by Brahmaji. Such Vaikuntha realization is possible by any devotee of the Lord situated in the transcendental position as a result of devotional service. In the Gopal Tapani Upanishad, Shruti, it is said, Gopavesho me purusha purastad avir bhuva. The Lord appeared before Brahma as a cowboy, that is, as the original personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna Govinda, who is later described by Brahmaji in his Brahma Samhita, chapter 5, text 29. Chintamani prakarasat masukalpa vriksha laksha viteshu surabhira vipalayantam lakshmi sahasra satasam brahma sevyamanam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. Brahmaji desires to worship the original personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, who resides in the topmost Vaikuntha planet, known as Goloka Vrindavan, where he is in the habit of keeping Surabhi cows as a cowboy, and where he is served by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune, the gopis, with love and respect. Therefore, Lord Sri Krishna is the original form of the Supreme Lord, Krishnastu Bhagavan Svayam. This is also clear from this instruction. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is Lord Krishna, and not directly Narayan or the Purusha avatars, which are subsequent manifestations. Therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam means consciousness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. And Srimad Bhagavatam is the sound representation of the Lord as much as the Bhagavad Gita is. Thus, the conclusion is that Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of the Lord, in which the Lord and his abode are perfectly realized. Amaganatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Anmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayamupa Kadamayam Darati Sva Patantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuktapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaragnatanditam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansikalpatayubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaisnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Svaminiti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasvatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayana, to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Sarasvati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Utama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 37. Etan matam samadhishta paramena samadhina bhavan kalpa vikalpeshu na vimuyati karhichit. O Brahma, just follow this conclusion by fixed concentration of mind, and no pride will disturb you, neither in the partial nor in the final devastation. Okay, so it was a long purport, like 3 full pages. We read the whole purport. I was thinking to stop in the middle, but it was so nectarian. I just wanted to hear more from Srila Prabhupada about this verse. And also I noticed this word, it's like, I think in that second sentence, he uses this word. Thus, the secret purpose of the most important Bhagavatite conclusion has been explained by the original speaker of the Srimad Bhagavatam, who is also the original speaker of the Bhagavad Gita, the personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. Bhagavatite, and what a word there. And so Prabhupada confirms there that it is Krishna speaking to Brahma. And in our Bhagavad Gita study course, we're studying chapter 10 now. In this purport, Prabhupada references a lot from chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita. Because chapter 10 has the seed verses of Bhagavad Gita, just like this chapter of Bhagavatam has the seed verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada also quotes one of those seed verses directly, 10.10. Tesam satata yuktanam bhajatam pratipurvagam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamu piyanti te. Krishna says, okay, if one's sincere, he'll give us the intelligence by which we can come to him. And so So this whole dialogue here, it's kind of starting with Brahma saying, okay, I got this big service to do. I'm the engineer of the universe. I'm organizing the whole universe, all the material energies from each subatomic particle to the bodies of the living entities to all the karmas and the demigods and all the planetary systems. So he says, okay, so I'm praying to you. I'm praying to you, Krishna. In doing this service, let me not become proud. That's how this whole thing starts. Like, let me not become proud in doing this service. So there's so much there for us to glean that in doing service, in fulfilling our responsibilities of life, in endeavoring in our spiritual path to be truly humble. And humble is not like some stereotyped external form. Humble doesn't mean like, oh, I won't speak anything. I'm too passive to speak. That's humble. No, humble, we can understand genuine humility as we're surrendered to our service. We're surrendered to fulfill our dharma in the highest sense. And that might look like quietly being in the background. It might look like surrendering to be bold as a lion in fulfilling our highest dharma. So it's not so like Srila Prabhupada's guru is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. He was known as the lion guru. So that's supreme humility. He's completely surrendered. Right? That's why Prabhupada gave the title to Bhagavad Gita as it is. So that's humility. Like, I'm not giving my fancy interpretation. I'm giving Krishna. I'm giving Krishna. I'm giving the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna as it is, as a devotee, as a devotee of Krishna. So there's so much here in the purport. So Prabhupada makes the point about, okay, so it's essentially, so Krishna is saying to Brahma, he's saying, so I appreciate you're sincerely wanting not to be proud in your service. Nice, wonderful. And he goes, so Krishna is saying, so give yourself sincerely to this process that I just described in these 6 verses, especially the 4 core verses, the 2 verses before that, Krishna's setting the stage. So give yourself sincerely to this process of bhakti, and you'll naturally remain enthusiastic and humble. You'll naturally remain enthusiastic and humble. And so this quality of humility is so foundational, because devotional service means like, it's not a thing of, I'll enjoy, because that's the thing, even if we do service, we can think, we can go to, oh, I'm better than you. I get up earlier than you. I chant more japa than you. And it's the same material mentality. I am number one. I'm lording it over you. So to actually continue, that's why there's that well-known verse by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Trinadapi sunichena taruriva sahishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. So that verse starts with cultivating. Lord Chaitanya is encouraging us, cultivate the consciousness to feel lower than the blade of grass, to be more tolerant than a tree, ready to offer all respects to others, and desiring no respect for oneself. So that's the first part of the verse, and the verse ends, and in such a state of consciousness, then you can do kirtan all the time. Because kirtan means I'm glorifying another person. And like my material ego is averse to glorifying another person. Essentially, that's what it means. in material life, even if we glorify someone, it's so that I get some perks. I get some perks. I glorify you, then I'll get a raise. I'll get promotion to the company, or just like, look, I'm an important person because I'm with this person, or something like that. So to glorify another person, that's like anathema. It's averse to the whole material ego thing. So to be steady in devotional service, and that's to be completely satisfied in that bliss of the soul, that requires that humility, kirtaniya siddhahari, to always, if we want to always be doing kirtan. And kirtan can mean studying Bhagavatam. Kirtan can mean like last night, there was a group of us led by Damayanti and Ladini Shakti out in Gainesville doing kirtan, talking to people, distributing books. And so Krishna is saying, so it's all kirtan, all services, because kirtan essentially means glorification. It doesn't essentially mean singing and musical instruments in its essential form. And so Krishna is saying, yeah, just be sincere in this process. And this process is this process of bhakti to Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. This is the goal of all the Vedic processes. That's a basic analogy. Okay, we can say like, there's the king, and then the queen knows the king completely. The queen represents bhakti. Okay, now the queen might have so many maidservants, and the maidservants also have some realization about the king. Their realization is like a true perspective on the king. Their realization, though, is incomplete. And so they're all meant to serve the queen. So just like there's Astanga yoga, and there's Raja yoga, and there's Jnana yoga and Karma yoga and Varnashram system. So they're, in the analogy, they're like the maidservants. They're like the maidservants. And through those processes, if one is sincere, one gets some realization of the absolute. And it's incomplete realization. The goal of all those processes, according to the Vedas, and Prabhupada keeps saying this is the Veda conclusion, the goal of all those processes is to serve the queen, bhakti. The goal of all those atapum birjuja shrestas varnashrama vibhagashas svanustitasya dharmasya samsitir haritoshanam, that the highest perfection one can achieve by fulfilling their responsibilities according to situation in life, varna and ashram, is bhakti, is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yogi nama pisarvesam madgiten antaratmana sharavan bhajiteyumam samyukta tamo mata. And so Krishna describes Hatha Yoga, Stanga Yoga, and he goes, and the goal of that is to please the queen. So through bhakti we get the most complete realization of the absolute, the personality of Godhead. Brahmano hi pratishtaham. So the non-personal realization, that's a true realization, and Krishna is the source of the non-personal realization. A name for Krishna is Yogeshwar, right? The last verse in Bhagavad Gita, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, Yatra Parta Dinordara, Tatra Shri Vijaya Bhutir, Juvanitir Matir Mama, Matir Mama. So Sanjaya says that wherever there's Krishna, the supreme mystic, Krishna is the master of all mystic powers. So the mystic yoga process, it's meant, again, to serve the queen. It's meant to bring one to bhakti for the most complete realization of the absolute. So it's not like other processes are wrong or deviant, but just like the realizations that they're designed to give in themselves are incomplete, and they're meant to be part of the yoga ladder, the yoga ruda, to bring us towards towards bhakti. Savaya pumsam parodamo yato bhakti ratoksaji ayatukya pratita yatma suprasidati. That the supreme occupation for all living entities is bhakti, devotion. Yato bhakti ratoksaji is bhakti, devotional service to the personality of Godhead. To completely satisfy the self, such service must be uninterrupted and unmotivated. And that's humility. That requires humility. Otherwise, my demand for respect, my demand to lord it over subtly or grossly will interfere with that regular awakening of the soul that is bhakti. Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Projita Janayat Yashu Vairagyam Gyanam Chaya Hetukam. And by engaging in devotional, offering everything to Krishna, by engaging in devotional service, then naturally one gets transcendental liberation from the bondage of the senses, which is the goal of so many other processes. So the goal of so many other processes to transcend the bondage of the pulling and pushing of the senses. So that comes naturally when we engage the senses in the master of the senses, Rishikesh, that's a name for Krishna, master of the senses. And one automatically gets knowledge. Right? Jnana yoga, get knowledge. So that comes naturally when we serve the queen, so to speak, knowledge, detachment. And of course, part of our process of bhakti is to study Srila Prabhupada's books, hear Srila Prabhupada's lectures, have discussions like this. And we endeavor to do this philosophical discussion in a spirit of bhakti, not in a spirit of Ishvaroham, Hambogi, Siddhoham, Balavan, Sukhi. Just like someone can the goal could be like, yeah, I'll get 3 more fancy cars in my fleet, or I'll have another $10 million in my bank account, accumulating. So similarly, we can accumulate knowledge with a material motivation. Look, I've got more knowledge. So, so that's something to look out for. That even in trying to acquire spiritual knowledge, philosophy, some impurity in our heart can take over. So we want to hear directly from Srila Prabhupada yesterday on the Harinam. And I was very moved by the experience, and it was very stretchy for me. But anyhow, so at one point, Valerie was there. Valerie was there, and so this really emphasizes the parampara principle. So I was just kind of like there on the sidewalk, trying to do some kirtan, banging kartals. I don't know if I did a service or a disservice, whatever it was. But Valerie was there, and then there was like one fellow, I think he was with his girlfriend, partner, and she was talking to him like that. And I couldn't hear what was going on, but obviously, he was like completely captivated and kind of like, yeah, I'll take those books. Yeah, I'll give you money, like that. So then, yeah, so like she was like obviously completely empowered. And so I was just trying to get some Shakti, from Bhakti and Valerie there. And so then she comes out, and then what she shared was just a few hours before. She was in the reading group led by Malini. And I'm not even sure what book you're all reading now, but she was in the reading group, Vaishnavi reading group. And yes, and then so then she had some like deep realization that day from the reading group. She was like, vacuuming her rugs while listening to the reading group, and something sunk very in. They were reading whatever book, Krishna book, Teachings of Queen Kunti, whatever you're reading. And so she said, so I just repeated what I heard in the reading group. And then I could see this fellow was just like transformed by transcendental knowledge. So Valerie heard it from Prabhupada, and whatever they were reading and whatever the discussion was, Valerie heard it from Prabhupada, comes out on the street and shares it with this fellow, and he's transformed. And that's the process. And that's the process. Now, of course, she did it in her own way. In fact, I don't think anyone could share whatever she shared in the way that Valerie shared. So naturally, so this isn't like being a robot or ridding ourselves of personality. No, naturally, we share according to our fresh realization. And what Prabhupada's stressing here is we don't change things. We don't change things. Yes, we share in our language with empathy, according to the time and circumstance and who we're speaking to, the individual, the group. And but we don't change things. And then there's potency. And that's why Bhagavad Gita, as it is, has potency. Bhagavad Gita has potency. And so Prabhupada's making the point that, because, okay, so the goal of Bhagavad Gita, Bhakti Mama Vijanati Yavinyashasmi Tatumam Tatutogeta Vishte Tadanantaram. The goal of Bhagavad Gita is devotion to Krishna. Someone could say, I don't like that goal. That's okay. That's okay. We all get to choose our life path and direction and what appeals to us and what doesn't. But that's the goal of Bhagavad Gita. So many maidservants are described, so many processes, and it all leads to bhakti. So Prabhupada's making the point here, and in chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita begins with Krishna saying to Arjuna, because you're my friend, because you're my devotee. That's why you're qualified to understand this process and this philosophy. Chapter 9 starts the same way. Idam tu te gyatamam pravaksham yana suyave gyanam vigyanam sayitam yajgatva mokshase subhat. Krishna says to Arjuna, because you're not envious of me, right? Because again, that's the material consciousness. I want to be the center, yes, and because I'm envious of others and like that. But because you're not envious of me, therefore you're receptive, your heart's fully receptive to receive this transcendental knowledge. And by receiving it, you'll be freed, you'll be liberated from the miseries of material existence. Chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Saevayam ayatetya yogo prokta paratana bhaktosime sakacheti rahasyam yetadutama. He says to Arjuna, he says, why am I speaking to you? Again, Arjuna wasn't known as the great scholar of the time. He was the alpha warrior of the time. So why isn't Krishna speaking to a professor or a great scholar or like that? No, he says, I'm speaking to you, Arjuna, because you're my devotee and you're my friend. So that's the qualification. So Prabhupada's making the point here, and I bet Prabhupada's kind of restrained. He says, that one who has no relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes they try to interpret Srimad Bhagavatam by their poor fund of knowledge and grammar and dry speculation. And so therefore, the Lord warns Brahma, and through Brahma, all future devotees of the Lord in the disciplic succession, that one should never be misled by the conclusion of the so-called grammarians or by others with a poor fund of knowledge, but must always fix the mind properly via the Parampara system. So Prabhupada's saying, look, if someone's not a devotee of Krishna, for sure, okay, like, yeah, everyone has their path, but you're not devotee of Krishna. Don't put your nose in Bhagavad Gita. Don't put your nose in Srimad Bhagavatam. These are devotional literatures. I don't like devotional literature. I prefer these Upanishads that focus on the white light. Okay, great. Don't put your nose in Bhagavad Gita. It's for devotees. And if you're not a devotee, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. Prabhupada's in a restrained way, that's what he's saying. Yeah, it's just you're not going to get it. because yeah, it's because okay, Bhagavad Gita says if you want to understand this, then it requires that you're sincere as a devotee of Krishna. It's saying like, here's how to understand it, and even if someone reads it and goes, I'm skeptical, okay, but that's okay, like I'm skeptical and I think that. So what Prabhupada's saying is, but those who give commentary on it, here's what it means. Prabhupada's saying, you're not a devotee. This is none of your business. Stay out of this. Not like don't read it, but you're present yourself as an authority, and you're not a devotee. Just by the book that you're trying to comment on, the book says by definition you're not going to get it. Same with Srimad Bhagavatam. So yeah. Shruti Smriti Puranadi Panchracha Vidimrita Aikantiki Hare Bhakti Utpataya Vikalpate. So Prabhupada, describing what Krishna is saying for Brahma, that yes, they're saying like, so Brahma, you'll be protected, you won't become proud if you sincerely give yourself to this process, as I just explained in the 4 seed verses. And this process is the most complete process for realization of the absolute, most complete. And then it goes, and be careful, don't get misled. Don't get misled. He's not saying like, really the main thing I'm getting, but probably he's not emphasizing don't get misled by other paths. Mainly he's saying don't get misled by something that looks like bhakti but is not parampara. And so that's the caution that Prabhupada's giving us in his purport to this verse. Krishna's cautioning Brahma, and Prabhupada is cautioning us. It goes, therefore the Lord warns Brahma, and through Brahma, all future devotees of the Lord in the disciplic succession of Brahma, that's us. Okay? So we get to participate in the continuation of the disciplic succession through hearing as it is and sharing as it is. In our own style, with our personality, with our creativity, but not changing. Let's call it, rigorously conservative at the core, and could be creative and innovative in the edge, in the application. Okay, but rigorously conservative at the core. So and so thus we emphasize, because just like Brahma is representing Krishna and Narada Muni is representing Brahma, Srila Vyasadeva representing Narada Muni, this is the disciplic succession. So our sublime opportunity in this, we get, to whatever extent we choose, we get to accurately represent Srila Prabhupada, and to enhance our capacity to do that as it is, we emphasize, as much as possible, let's hear directly from Srila Prabhupada. Read his books, hear his lectures, read his letters, hear his bhajan, as much as possible, directly hear and read Srila Prabhupada's vibration. Then our intelligence will be more and more spiritually sharp to make a distinction between as it is and something that's maybe some fluffy sounding concoction, but it's not as it is. And as it is, that's the that's where the power is. That's where the awakening of the soul is. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sajika Bunai Shravanani Shuddha Chitta Karye Udai. Love of Krishna is eternally situated in the hearts of all living entities, and it's awakened by hearing as it is. It's awakened by this process of hearing from a bona fide pure devotee of Krishna and chanting, hearing and sharing. So that I gave, it's very vivid right now in my mind. Valerie last night. So she heard from Prabhupada in the reading group, and then she shared. And I witnessed the potency. Okay, so I'll read this verse again. This is Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 37. Etan matam samatishta paramena samadina bhavan kapa vikalpeshu na vimuyati karhichit. O Brahma, just follow this conclusion by fixed concentration of mind, and no pride will disturb you, neither in the partial nor in the final devastation. Hare Krishna, thanks for your presence and attention. I welcome comments or questions. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
I have a few comments and I have a question.
Okay, Malini.
A comment about Valerie.
Oh, yeah.
Very funny because what we read yesterday in Krishna book was the pastime with Sunda and Kalayavana.
Okay.
And in Krishna book basically is ghastly. That's probably the most ghastly part of Krishna book, like river of blood and head and arms and all that. So when you were telling your story, I was laughing a lot. Imagining.
Well, okay, I'll just comment because I when Valerie was sharing that she just shared with the fellow what she heard. She got some realization about her parenting, right? She has a little child, so I don't know what realization she got about her parenting and the rivers of blood flowing in that pastime, but she said she got some realization about her parenting, just sharing Valerie as it is.
We had a lot of fun yesterday. Another point I like that you made, because like Brahma is speaking about pride, and it's so easy to get puffed up.
Yeah.
Even sometimes just feeling good in kirtan or feeling good about devotional service, and all of a sudden pride comes that I'm special, like gopis, like they all felt they were special. Krishna disappeared, and Krishna disappeared from our sides too, in the same way. So it's very relevant that Lord Brahma asked about the question. And what I appreciate is that you made a connection, between pride and envy.
Yeah.
I can see, of course, the root cause of fall down is envy, and envy and pride are so connected. Like envy is wanting something else that someone else has, and pride is thinking I have more than other people have, or more special, or more realization, or more ecstasy, or more whatever, something. So I appreciated that. And then I have a question about the verse itself. I appreciate the reassurance of Lord Krishna, about pride. Just follow this conclusion.
Yeah.
Mine, and no pride will disturb you. So that's really nice that Krishna say, yeah, you can be the engineer universe superior to everyone in this universe. And then he said, neither in a partial nor the final devastations. So why will Brahma get proud during the devastation? That's the question I have.
Okay, so why does Krishna add those clauses? Neither in the partial nor in the final devastation. That I hear that's what you're asking about.
Yeah, because he's creating and he's ruling over, and he's a creator, and everybody worship him during the maintenance of the universe. At devastation, I could imagine that there's nothing to be proud of, because everything is crumbling, everything created is kind of destroyed.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So, and I'm not seeing in the purport where Prabhupada addresses that directly. At the same time, you're inviting me to conjecture about Krishna's psychology, so I'm going to do it. And I regard this as permissible conjecture that, okay, I think that my sense, and this certainly isn't the only answer, but for me, this is something that makes sense. Krishna is being kind of poetic here. He's not so much being technical. He's more being poetic. And in a sense, he's saying, you won't be disturbed by pride as long as you're sincerely in the process of bhakti. You won't be disturbed forever. Meaning, like, okay, partial devastation, that happens about, was it every 8,600,000,000 years. Okay, so Krishna saying, not in 8 billion years, and total final devastation, it's 311,040,000,000,000 years. So Krishna is saying, like, you just be in this process, and then in billions of years, you'll stay humble and not proud. And in hundreds of trillions of years. So that's my sense. Krishna is more being like poetic here. He might also be saying, like, yeah, maybe at the time of devastation, maybe there would be some special temptation for Brahma to become proud. Could be. Like this, what I'm getting is Krishna saying, yeah, not in 8 billion years and not in 311 trillion years. This process is eternally sheltering and protective. That's my sense.
Like he's saying, like you will be eternally free from pride if you just follow my instruction, if you follow this process, if you follow what shared with you, then you will be eternally free from pride. Yeah, and also, as you were speaking, I was also conjecturing and listening to you, and what you're saying makes complete sense. And also, maybe, like sometimes we may get puffed up or pride about something we created when it gets destroyed.
Yeah.
Like there is that tendency, like maybe when we are in the middle of it, we are so absorbed in it or so focused in it that we may just go with the flow.
Yeah.
When things get destroyed, taken away, or disappear, it may be the moment where somehow we get like, well, but wait, that was mine. I did it. It was, all that. And go into pride in our devotional service at that moment.
I appreciate that. Like the whole universe for Brahma is like a sandcastle. And then the devastations are like the tide's coming and washing my sandcastle away. Wait, but I built this. So that makes sense. Thank you, Malini. Back to Keith.
Yeah, I was thinking after Malini's class last week, it was mentioning about not becoming prideful over knowledge. Once you acquire more knowledge, tendencies become prideful, and I recognize this tendency within myself, and being a philosopher, and that's what was coming to me after, is that's why preaching is so important, because otherwise it's just like you gather the knowledge in my head or whatever, and I think, oh, it comes from me, it's mine, so I may have more than other people or a better capacity. And then I guess I'm getting from this class is that the preaching has to be done with the intention of the emancipation of the soul and connecting them with Krishna. And then that's the way that acquiring knowledge, the pride that comes with that, can be dealt with. Does this sound correct to you?
I appreciate what you're sharing, Keith. I appreciate what you're sharing. And from my view, it's completely aligned with what we get from Brahma and the Parampara and Srila Prabhupada. Yeah, we are meant to cultivate knowledge through study and through offering a flower. Our actual realization of all these truths increase by any process of bhakti, including study, including kirtan. Then our knowledge deepens. So that's, we hear, and then we're meant to share. We're meant to share. And I like your point, Keith, because in that sharing, and okay, here's yet another realization from Valerie. There's a clear theme in this class. So I was with her, and Ladini was there, and Damayanti was just always like magically engaged and engaging people in this transcendental knowledge process. We were sometimes just be observing. She's just like a fish in water, and engaging people in transcendental conversation in a personal way. So Valerie approached someone, and she got rejected. So then she came back, and then she was sharing with me. She said, like, yeah, well, this is really good. She said, this is really good for smashing my ego. And so she wanted to share the knowledge like she did with others, and they would receive. And she said, and then she was like very introspective, and she said, I don't mind getting rejected, and it's good for my ego that way. It's good for me, humility. She goes, and what really hurts is because sometimes, she said, sometimes I get rejected by people who are mean. It's one thing, a polite rejection, but to get rejected by people who are mean, and then she goes, then I want to get back at them. And so, so I think it's completely consistent with what you're sharing, Keith. That yeah, we're not meant to hoard knowledge like it's mine, like my car, my house. We're meant to share it, and in sharing it, some might receive with so much appreciation, and some might insult us. Even we can look at, let's call it, the truly most humble, empowered, those who shared, not someone like Jesus, right? So he had all transcendental knowledge, and so many appreciated, at the time, and over the thousands of years. But certainly some got angry, some hated him. They wanted to kill him. They killed him like that. So it requires humility, and it fosters humility to share the realizations. Thank you, Keith. Gajendra Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, good morning.
Hare Krishna.
This is tying into some of these statements you're making, like regarding presentations of the Bhagavad Gita. And I'm wondering if you can make some further comments to detail a little more. So what I'm looking at is, so you may have the Bhagavad Gita, and ideally one is receiving, hearing Bhagavad Gita from a pure, loving devotee of Lord Krishna, and that's the ideal.
Yeah.
On the other end, it's very clear that if somebody is presenting Bhagavad Gita in a very unbona fide way, that's denying the personality of Godhead, or just presenting something contrary to the devotional view, that's just completely wrong and rejected. It's the opposite. So my question is about maybe the 50 shades of saffron in between. And I'll give you a specific example. There, a young man that was staying at the ashram here for some time was very enthusiastic about a book that had been influential on him. It's called Thick Face, Black Heart. Kind of a gruesome sounding, unkind title, but actually an interesting book. He was really wanted to share it with me, so I let it sit with my books and peeked into it. And then it became a little more interesting to me when I kept on noticing that the author, while presenting quotes from some different places, was often quoting Bhagavad Gita, not as it is, but easily recognizable, the verses to me. And I notice even in places, the author sometimes would didn't say a lot about Krishna, but actually had like Lord Krishna, used the phrase Lord Krishna. This was not someone from India, they were from China. And so once I was seeing that, I personally decided to try to use it, I guess, as an inroad, since it was a book he liked so much and Bhagavad Gita was being quoted. I would sometimes use it as an opportunity to, talk about Bhagavad Gita, or here's more what that verse says, etc. But the question is, how do we view the Bhagavad Gita when it's in that area where it's not it's not being presented via the parampara, but it's also not being presented in an inimical or denying way of the personality of Godhead. It's just being utilized. Maybe, here's some points about duty or equanimity.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if you have any comments just to help me, become a little more nuanced in distinction and discretion and application.
Thank you, Gajendra Prabhu. Thanks. Yeah. And there are shades. There are shades of saffron, for sure. Like in this situation you described, then the there is some potency. There is some potency coming through. It's not like Krishna is limited. And even though this Chinese author, I don't know him, but maybe maybe he's not like really bhakti path. I don't know. Maybe he is, but anyhow, it's not like Krishna can't empower the words through that translation of a Bhagavad Gita verse. So some potency is there, and the way you described about the young fellow who was at your ashram, I envision myself responding in the same way. It's like, oh yeah, okay, this book is inspiring for you, yeah, and to show understanding of how he's inspired. Oh, and the Bhagavad Gita is quoted. Yes, that is a key principle, Dharma in Bhagavad Gita. And just to appreciate, empathize, and according to the readiness and openness and container of the relationship, then also to empathize and to support everyone involved to come to, let's call it a more and more complete realization of the fullest purpose of Bhagavad Gita. So yeah, definitely maybe even a lot of potency comes through those words. Yeah.
May I ask another question, a little more personal in my own inquiry? This is just sort of coming up right now, and it's a little bit self-inquiry. So I feel in ways attached to Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. And sometimes I wonder, like, so there are other Bhagavad Gita translations, and not all of them are like demonic. Some of them are very devotional in a way, or even like the Janeshwari is very interesting. But there's a part of me that feels it's not even about being like philosophically safe, but there's a part of me that would be like, I'd really be, I just really want everybody to be with Bhagavad Gita as it is. I really kind of like everyone to be like a Gaudiya Vaishnava. I'd like everyone to follow Sri Chaitanya and Rupa Goswami. And I kind of wonder, to what extent am I just being, well, that's me and that's my egoism. That's what I'm doing. So that's what I wish the rest of the world was doing, versus like, there's something really, really special here that I wish other people could just really get. Really get it. Do you understand what I'm trying to question?
I believe I have an understanding, and I appreciate what I'll call both the philosophical and personal aspects of your question. I get where you're coming from is healthy in your introspection. One thing I'll comment is, like, when Prabhupada first came to the West, he didn't have Bhagavad Gita as it is. That was published later. He would read the translations from probably the Bhagavad Gita. He would probably say that distorts Krishna's words the most.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't read the purports, but he would read the translations. Of course, whoever is so just, there is that liberalness, and Prabhupada made sure whoever was hearing, got the actual purport. So before Prabhupada printed his Bhagavad Gita, he did read the translations of someone who was changing things and giving you twisted purport. So that's okay. And then in what you're saying, Gajendra, it sounds very natural and healthy, along with a caveat. And I relate to what you're saying. Natural, just like whatever. A child has here's a fun toy, I want to share it with you. Just very natural. Well, this is just like, this gives me so much joy and bliss, I want to share it. And so that's just like natural sharing and healthy. And then at the same time, I think it also, shows nice self-awareness. If we're also looking as like, is part of me wanting to share because I need others to be like me? Is that part of the motivation? There's different levels of motivation, and there could be from my insecurity, let me look honestly, or it's just like, I just want to share. Is it from love of Prabhupada? Is it from love of Krishna? There's just different levels of purity. So whereas it seems real natural that here's something that's filled my life and heart with so much fulfillment and joy. Yeah, I want to share it. So for sure we don't want to impede that flow. And of course that flow is so pleasing to the personalities who ought to be pleased, Srila Prabhupada and Srimati Radharani. So we don't want to impede that. And then simultaneously we can look, is there some impurity in my desire to share? Not that like, oh, so let me hide in a cave for 10 years till I'm completely pure. But in sharing, let me do my anartha nivritti, pulling the weeds process. Is there something where like, kind of like a subtle control? Oh, I've influenced you, I'm powerful. Sure, yeah, we want to look at all that stuff too.
Thank you for that. I'd like to make just one quick comment myself. On a personal level, I feel as time is going on, I'm sort of kind of raising my standard or requiring more of where I do put my time into relationships or speaking or discussing spiritual matters.
Yeah.
To be with people where I can be more direct. Like I almost feel like I don't want to waste time dealing with the subtle peripherals happening. But like with the ashram here, it's like, I just feel like it's really wanting to have a higher standard of requirement.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something I need to do for myself to feel more aligned and go deeper in my own spiritual life and my relationship with Prabhupada and Krishna. And that's why I'm setting that standard.
I appreciate that. I relate to that. Yeah, and I hear you. I don't hear you coming from a judgmental place. I do hear you getting more and more clear and urgent about your particular service, your particular mission on behalf of Prabhupada. And as a result of that clarity and urgency, you're establishing boundaries that are firmer in terms of like for someone to actually live there, that like there's some more screening about someone has some level of seriousness. Yeah, that makes sense to me. My sense from hearing from Srila Prabhupada is Srila Prabhupada would completely support you at that, in that. And not that like, well, you should have done that 30 years ago, but like you notice, okay, you're going through your life stages, and at this phase of life, it's to use a Prabhupada analogy, like on a battlefield, the medic, he's going to go to those who he can see. If I spend 15 minutes here, a good chance of saving a life. I could spend 2 hours there, and almost no chance I'll make a difference. So you're just using finer and finer expression. Yeah.
Thank you for your understanding and support. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Gajendra. Anything else? Hare Krishna, thank you all for your presence and association. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Jai, Hare Krishna.